Hi, everybody. If you are here in this session now, is hopefully because you did not attend the one at 12. Listening to me twice is wrong on the same topic. Just kidding. You're welcome if you want to stay again. But this is the session in English, and we're going to get started now. There's also Sarah here with me. Sarah, feel free to chip in anytime you want. Anybody here who would like to interrupt or ask a question, just raise your hand and do so, and Tiziano will help us by allowing you to speak. So I will get us started by sharing some slides with you that will help me convey the message, okay? So here we go. Very briefly, something about myself as we start. What I'm living today is what I call my third or fourth, probably professional life. My first professional life, I was a professional football player in Italy. That's my Panini sticker, which meant I made it somehow. And I played until the age of 22 and a half. And then I had a bad injury at my knee that forced me to quit that career. I was young enough to find a new path. And what happened, I became, in a very fast growing and successful career, I became manager of hotels and resorts around the world. So I work in the Maldives. That's the beautiful island that you see there. I also work in Milan for a very luxurious hotel. I work in Kenya. I work in Zanzibar, in Egypt, in Ukraine, in very many different places. Then when I turned, when I was in my early 30s, I met who is today my wife and also mother of our 3 wonderful children. And I remember her saying, Carlo, if you want to marry me, you better get a proper job. Somehow working in these beautiful places was not a proper job, but what she meant is, I want some stability in one place, let's go back to Europe. And so I went for further studies at that time, and that got me started in a new career in education. And I started here in Switzerland in 2012. First, I started to teach in a hospitality school in tourism in Lyon. And then I moved to a business school. That was a very interesting moment for me, a business school Lausanne in 2015. We decided to run the school with a system called holacracy that gets rid completely of people management and only look at work management. So there is no hierarchy, and the people organize in circles and nested in work. And this was a very interesting for me to live and to study what happens to group and to collaboration and to empowerment in general, to accountability when you get you get rid of the hierarchy. It was very interesting time for me to research and to learn. And it took me very far that, because at some point my research crossed with Mike Lee, who was studying at Harvard Business School, similar things. And together we decided to create a course that is called Collaborative Leadership, Building the Organization of the Future, that really look at these new ways of organizing work, looking at collective intelligence, looking at collaborative practices and how to make that work. And because I like to live those, let's say, new way of organizing work, less hierarchical and much more participative and collaborative, I started to put myself in those ecosystems that are working around the world. And there are plenty that are working on the Sustainable Development Goals. For instance, here I am with Paul Polman, the ex-CEO of Unilever, who's a champion of multi-stakeholder collaboration. And here I am today also working for the Economy of Francesco, which is a global network of thousands of young economists who are trying to write write a new manifesto for the economy together, and we'll present it to the Pope in November soon. So these are great things for me to explore, research, and learn more on how can we work together using, I would say, different recipes from what we got used to when it comes to collaboration and organization of work in the 20th century. So today, I work 50% for Deloitte as a senior advisor for leadership, and I work 50% as a dean of executive education at the Franklin University, Switzerland, in Lugano. And that's enough about me. What I would like to take you through is some research that I think is very important for us to understand when we approach the work in teams. So when we work in teams, somehow we have sometimes some expectation that we all good at collaborating. You know, we get into teams, we introduce to each other, and off we go, and we will be able to collaborate. Actually, there's some stuff that gets in the way of collaboration that I want you to remind you through this presentation, okay? And I focus on 3 areas of things that get in the way of collaboration, but there's unfortunately even more than that, but it's good to be aware of these things, okay? Number 1 is groups tend to conform to majority of opinions, okay? This is a real issue in groups. When there is a majority thinking, we tend to lean our way toward that majority. And why is it a problem at the end is a majority? Well, it is a problem because more often than not in today's world, what the majority is thinking is not necessarily what is right or what is needed. And there's a lot of research that tell us that how groups tend to conform to majority opinion. The one that you see here, it's a simple research that reminds us we were putting people in groups of 10, and 9 were actually actors, and 1 was the poor person who was not an actor, right? And then we were asking them, look at the left side. You see all these bars on the screen. Look at the left side, and then tell me, out of the other 3 bars, which one is identical to the one on the left? So it's a simple question. You see the first one, the first line is the one with the number 3 inches. The second one is the one with the number 5 inches, right? And if you ask this question to the group of 10, everybody will say the right answer. Also the poor person who's being researched. When you ask it for the 3rd time, on purpose, all the 9 actors will give the wrong answer. What do you think the 10th person will say? Well, in over 70% of the cases, the poor guy who's being researched will most likely say the wrong answer too. And that is because our brain is there to alert us. If everybody else say that, who are you to say the opposite? It's better to shut up. Don't, try to be different. And all these different things that our brain will tell us. So groups tend to conform to the majority of opinion is a real risk that happens in groups. The second one is individuals are unlikely to disagree with those in power, even when it goes against one's own conscience or values. This was a very interesting research that was done after the Second World War, when researchers were trying to understand how is it possible that millions of people would actually follow dictators in some horrible, down all very horrible avenues like we've seen during that moment of our history, right? And when this research was repeated, by the way, later on as well, it was an interesting research. So they call you in a studio, and then there is a person on the other side of the wall that is tied into electrical shock. And you are on the other side, and what you have to do, you have to ask questions through a microphone to the other person on the other side of the wall. And every time the other person will answer wrong, you have a button and you can give an electrical shock. I know it's a bit of a crazy experiment. At that time, it was allowed. Nowadays, they do it in different ways. So you ask the first question, they give you the wrong answer, you give an electrical shock, and the other person, will shout, right? And then you ask the second, and then every time the electrical shock, the voltage escalates, they ask you to put it up, okay? And so until at some point when continue to give wrong answer, you can kill the other person. Now, when they did this experiment, there is a doctor in the room with a white dress that resemble authority, right? And will tell you, you should not stop. Please go ahead, continue. And believe it or not, if I'm going to ask you now, how many of you would actually go until the end of the experiment? Most likely you would say, I would never do that. And I ask that, raise your hand, who would do it? Nobody raised their hand. When you are in that situation, in that room, with a person with authority, like the white dress that tells you, and actually the doctor in this experiment could escalate that question 4 times. So if you say no the first time, they will insist, you must continue the experiment. You are requested to continue the experiment. You are here to conduct the experiment. So when they repeat it 2, 3, 4 times, up to 60% of the people in the room, they continue the experiment. And there are videos online that demonstrate this research. But here is human being under pressure from being told what to do from an authoritative person. Maybe this can remind you sometimes when you have been in a meeting room with a boss that is asking you or the team or the group to do things that you don't agree with. And we see these kind of scandals over and over on the news. We've recently seen Volkswagen scandal, we've seen the Boeing scandal, and we keep seeing, even now with the COVID situation, entire administration that they had to ignore the risk because maybe there is a president or somebody in charge that say, this is not a real threat. Don't do that, don't do that. So unfortunately, this is how we act as human beings. The third one, when we are in groups, the third one is groups tend to share and consider common information over unique information. It is also very interesting when we get together. For instance, if I give you an example of interviewing somebody for a job, we, as a team of 4, we interview the same person, and each of us have done the interview. Then we get together and we want to debrief, right? So what are we going to do very soon? You will see that we all share our finding. After 10 minutes, what we will do very fast, we will try to converge to our common opinion. So all the things that we noticed in common, that's exactly what we will focus. And we will make a decision based on those common findings. Doing that, especially today in what we call the VUCA world, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, that is not a good idea. We find comfort in common ideas, but we don't find the gold mine necessarily in the common ideas. More often than not, the gold mine is actually in the outliner, in the idea that don't necessarily look obvious at the beginning, or the findings that don't necessarily make sense at the beginning. So my invitation, especially in a process like hackathon, that I know at the beginning you will diverge, and then at some point you need to look for convergence. Well, in that process of convergence, make sure you pay enough attention to the dissenting voices, enough attention to the information that at a first instance didn't look necessarily like the right one, okay? So finally, what is really all of this about? What really gets in the way when we are in group? Well, it's hard to speak up when we are in teams, when we are in groups. And the reason why it's hard to speak up is because none of us really want to look ignorant when we are in a group. Come on, it doesn't feel good, right, to look ignorant. So our brain, which is there to defend us, what will tell us? don't ask questions. Even if you didn't understand something, don't ask questions, because otherwise you will look ignorant. Or none of us like to look or want to look incompetent, so don't admit weakness or mistake. You made a mistake, make sure you cover it very well, because otherwise people will think you are an incompetent. None of us want to look intrusive. Well, don't offer ideas. That's what our brain will tell us, right, to defend us. None of us want to look negative. Well, don't critique the status quo. This is the mechanism that our brain put in place to defend us from discomfort when we are in teams. But imagine your team today in the hackathon, or any team in an organization where people struggle to ask questions. They struggle to admit weaknesses or mistakes. They struggle to offer new ideas. They struggle to critique the status quo. What kind of success, what kind of findings they will really be able to find? All of this is well backed up by research that has been done by the Harvard Business School, but also recently by Google. And it's a research called the Google Aristotle that tells us what really works in teams and how can you predict the success of a team. I would say not versus the failure, but really Google was trying to understand how come we have teams that are so much more effective and efficient in the way they work, and they're so much more successful than others. So what makes the difference between, let's say, medium team in terms of results and excellent teams? And it's interesting that after studying hundreds of teams, they came up for these dimensions. So teams that are good in creating a sense of dependability and accountability in their members, that are good in putting the right structure and clarity in their team, that are good as individuals to find meaning in the work that they are doing, that are good and reflect on what is the impact of the work that I'm about to do as a team. And finally, teams that have what we call a psychological safety, meaning all the things that I presented to you a few minutes ago, all those difficulties to speak up, they actually able to overcome those difficulties as a team. In particular, what this research tells us that actually as a dimension, psychological safety was by far the most important factor for team success. And what is psychological safety really? Well, psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Team psychological safety creates a shared understanding that candor is expected. What does this mean? It means that actually speaking up in a team when you disagree or when you made a mistake, it is not only tolerated, it's actually expected. We as a team, we manage to learn that speaking up, we know how to use the mistakes and how to use the question and the disagreement as a trampoline for innovation and better solution. Those teams that are not able to disagree, that are not able to discuss the mistakes, they stay in a medium and low output. And this is not so obvious because come on, let's face it, it's not so easy to disagree, right? We have our comfort zone in agreement, but you can actually learn to be very pragmatic with disagreement. You can also learn to have grace with disagreement. You don't have to kill each other in disagreement. You can use facts. You can use scripts to get through the disagreement. But those disagreements, those mistakes, those crazy ideas, that's exactly what are needed in successful teams. And that's exactly what I invite you to make work in your teams during this hackathon. Okay. So that was it for the speedy presentation. And like I was saying before, if you have any question or comments, maybe you want to share something as you approach now the work of your team, or reflection from back, if you find yourself some common thinking with what I just described, just please raise your hand. Let's enter into a dialogue. We have, I think, another 10 minutes to discuss together, hopefully in a psychologically safe environment that you feel. So I'll stay silent a bit now and see if anybody want to offer a thought or a question. And again, just raise your hand, and then Tiziano will unmute your microphone.
Hey, Carlo. I'm on stage now. Just
I can see you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your sessions. Let's wait a bit for any questions that can pop up. But let's say that maybe we can end the session a bit earlier so that people can go back to their work. Let's wait just another minute, so it's good for people. Maybe a lot of them are now engaging in following your suggestions. So let's wait a bit, and then I'm just using these 2 minutes to say thank you so much for everything you've done for these sessions.
Thank you for having me here to help.
Okay, I think we can go. So we can close the session, Carlo. Thank you so much, guys. You on the other side, and see you soon for the next session. We will have the first one in Italian about sustainable development goals, and then the one in English. Bye bye. Thank you, Carlo.
Ciao, grazie. Bye.
Ciao.